And we're live. Welcome back to the Red Hot Show, episode 12 this week. Never a dull moment in the world. We've got a lot to cover today. Welcome, Big Saucy.
Thank you, Natho. It's great to be here.
Yes,
Very nice
yes,
to
sir.
be here.
We are going to talk about the mystery drones, our take on that. We're going to talk about all the developments with Trump. We're going to talk about Trudeau and his potential exit. We've got the markets, plenty of things happening in the markets, lots of exciting stuff. Bitcoin pumping through new all-time highs once again, despite a bit of a drawback today. Plenty of action to cover. So welcome, my friend. Big Saucy is going to kick us off with his little overview of the last week, and then we're going to dive into some of the main talking points.
Thank you, Nath. Well, look, again, I'm going to start off with a message of positivity. I think, Natho, as I look out onto a beautiful Sydney morning, the sun is shining, the left is losing, and common sense is firmly prevailing. And I think that is a sentiment shared across the Western world. Left-wing governments are crumbling, as we'll get into, and really, Nath, what we're witnessing, I was speaking to my partner about this yesterday, I think we really have arrived at a bit of an inflection point, and I think the world is really starting to wake up. We've talked for a long time about public consciousness rising, but I think the point we're at now is that people are realizing there is a far superior alternative to the woke, left pandering status quo that we've become accustomed to. So, Nath, again, positive, optimistic outlook. I know we'll dive into all things US politics. I think we'll touch on a bit of Ozpol. We'll get into the horror show Canadian scenes at the moment as well. But yeah, look, I just wanted to start off with that message of positivity because good things are happening and we're seeing it right throughout the globe.
Love it.
Where do you want to start, big fella?
I think we've got to kick things off with the drones.
Take it away.
Well, perhaps I give you my take, and then you can rebound off that. But it was an interesting one. I spent a long time on it this Monday. I was keeping tabs on it last week, and I've always been of the belief that there's two narratives at play within the UAP, UFO line of thinking. Now, from the top, I'll say that these crafts are definitely man-made. They're not alien technology. These are US government-built drones for purposes that I will outline shortly. But for the benefit of the listeners, the history that I'm pretty well across is that, and I've always stuck true to since I went down this rabbit hole about 2 years ago, and I've always been fascinated by it, but particularly 2 years ago, is that during the Eisenhower era, he warned us. Everyone's probably seen that famous 3-minute clip by now where he warned us of the military-industrial complex, the powers that be, and how it would potentially destroy Western civilization if not controlled properly. Prior to him was Truman, Harry Truman. And Truman was the president during the, I think, or at least right around that time, the Roswell incident, where there was the famous UFO crash, which would have been just after Hiroshima and a lot of the nuclear testing that was going on there. So the thesis was, this whole narrative that I buy into, is that when we started blowing up nukes on planet Earth, it attracted something in the cosmos through frequency and obviously, nuclear aftermath that can be felt. I'm not a scientist, I won't be able to articulate this, but basically the way it transcends galaxies is frightening. So it would have rung alarm bells, basically. We had a visit there was a crash, and from that moment on, the secret programs were founded. The Majestic 12, if listeners want to look that up, that's a really, really interesting, seldom talked about group that was hypothesized to be the founding group of these secret operations that covered up the whole incident and released fake propaganda to push people off the scent at the time of what was actually going on. And then the ensuing sort of 10, 15 years into the 60s, all of these released documents that you can look at allude to the fact that they successfully reverse engineered these technologies, and we've had these technologies ever since. So the majority of these sightings, I feel, in the last 50, 60 years, 99% of these things are just human-made drone crafts that we've had for a very, very long time. I don't think they're alien visits. But it's important to delineate between it's important to declare that I do think there has been visits, but the majority certainly aren't. And in this case, it aligns with the video I did this week on the New World Order, which we've seen all too much the last few years, their presence with COVID and the WEF. And we're pretty, I mean, even you can get on board with the fact that there's some malevolent groups at play when it comes to pushing agendas. And I've always felt that Project Bluebeam was kind of like the last hurrah to see if they can successfully scare a population into believing that there's an existential threat to mankind that's beyond government. And that's exactly what I feel this could be an early sort of test towards. That's where I land. I think they're human-made. I think they're doing this to instill fear. They built in the nuclear. They're trying to find a nuclear bomb, or they're trying to help. Like, I don't buy any of that. I think it's all just a big hoax to, basically incite panic, so that when this supposed alien or hologram comes down, we all fall in line and come together and band together under this one world government, which, as you said at the top of the call, I don't think it's going to happen. Good is winning. People smell this. The memes this week have been amazing. People sniff this out straight away. You're not going to fool us, basically, and we're going to question everything. That's where they're losing. Even if I'm wrong and it's not this psyop, because a lot of the officials are also saying, a lot of the news outlets are saying that, we don't know what these are.
Yes.
Basically trying to allude. So there's the nuclear narrative. Some people are saying that they're hunting down some lost Ukrainian nuclear missile. And then there's another narrative, which also scares the shit out of people. And then there's the other one, which is, we actually don't know what these are. There's aliens coming. So either way you look at it, they're trying to instill fear. I'm not buying into it. Unless I see one flying over my rural property and it says g'day, then maybe I might reconsider it. It's all too convenient to be happening in big built-up urban areas. So that's my take, big fella. What are your thoughts and how have you interpreted it?
Well, I recall the Chinese spy balloons, or alleged Chinese spy balloons, which the US government, Biden administration, of course, frankly, completely shanked, Nath. They showed their ineptitude, and they showed, they showed great weakness in how they dealt with that situation and problem. And yes, panic and fear ensued in public forum, which is never good. But Nath, my main point here, it's a similar point, is this is what happens when you have no leader. Joe Biden is not running the free world. I think everyone knows that. If he wasn't fit to run for president, he's not fit to serve as president, yet he still had to serve an additional however many months in office. Serve, by the way, I'm using very loosely. So, Nath, what I think happens when countries and the Western world gets themselves into these types of positions is it's the people behind the curtains, as we all know, that are running the show. to a large extent. So in this case, Nath, well, who are these behind the scenes operators? What are their motives? And the truth is, it makes total sense that the public has all-time low faith in governments and are inclined not to believe the narratives that they're spitting out, particularly when they show such recklessness and such a lack of care for their constituents. And this is the prime example of exactly that panning out. It seems, Trump's rhetoric is certainly that this is the government is well aware of what's happening, likely to be probably in charge, in control of what's occurring. And yet, the public are panicking, and rightly so. So, Nath, I just think this is yet another. You could be right, by the way. Your theory could absolutely be right. And what I'm saying is, people like you who think through independently and do the research and come up with these theories, well, it has absolute relevance, given that I don't think anyone in their right mind can have total trust in administrations like Joe Biden's. Because it ain't Joe Biden, the person they supposedly elected into office, that's running the show. So, yeah, Nath, it's kind of scary times in that sense. But again, I do think, as you say, the public is so aware, and everything's going to be questioned now, except right-wing governments are coming into power, but it's a different shape of right-wing, as we discussed last week. And the public have more trust in right-wing governments across the board at the moment.
Yes.
Is the clear trend.
Yes. And I think as well, sorry, I should have said at the end of my little spiel that the motive behind this, off the back of, I guess, Biden's incompetence, but also him being used as the puppet, is, of course, to block Trump's inauguration, because there's the more sinister aspect to it. Under certain laws, so there's this continuation effect law that came in during the Bush era, and there's a number of other subsequent laws that tie into this, but essentially, high level for the listeners, under this Continuation Act, in states, in incidences of civil emergency and statewide emergencies, there is a continuation effect that occurs with the government that's currently in power. So basically, if there was, say, an alien invasion, right, a supposed alien invasion, the government could use this law to their advantage to block the inauguration and instill the continuation effect of the current administration to basically get them through this emergency, however long that lasts. That emergencies include, the pandemics, all other things. But again, do I think that's going to happen? No. But when you stitch all these things together, it can get quite alarming to see that there very well could have been a much more calculated agenda playing out. Yeah.
Well, I think anyone has every right to be sinister in light of, in light of what's happened over the course of the last 4 years. I don't think it is unreasonable, to go to that kind of worst case scenario motive. So yeah, Nath, look, it's look, as you always say, it's kind of the last squeal of a dying animal in the sense of the Biden administration and the damage it's caused to social fabric and public trust. So fortunately, we won't have to worry much longer about his disastrous tenure as president.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, should we move? We'll move to something a bit more positive.
Excellent.
Despite the fact that we both are very positive.
Yeah. We're very happy.
Despite
the last 6 minutes of rambling and ranting.
tell us about your interpretation of Masayoshi-san, one of our friends that we did a story on a long time ago. I've done a couple of stories on him. The little fella was over there pumping up Big Trumpy's tires. How have you interpreted him and all the rest of the crew that have been spending time with him of late?
Yes, Nath. Well, this will feed into the markets chat, of course. But first of all, on a light note, let me just say how. What's the right word? I mean, the right word might even be cute, without sounding condescending. Without sounding condescending, that was the cutest press conference I think I've seen in a very long time. So Massa-san beaming, showing great respect and love for the incoming 47th president, Donald Trump. And during the press conference, I'm not sure if you saw, Nath, but obviously he committed $100 billion worth of projects into the US market, and guaranteed 100,000 jobs at a minimum. But during the press conference, as Massa-san's explaining his decision and talking about his confidence in Trump, Trump interrupts somewhat and says, sweetly, "Oh, Massa, let's just make it 200 billion. Like, can you commit to that now?" In front of all the media and in front of the whole world. And more or less, Massa said, "Oh yes, maybe. I think that's likely." And so, so we witnessed live a little Trump negotiation, and Trump holding Massa-san accountable for perhaps going a lot deeper. But look, Nath, the point being, clearly Trump's been very busy at Mar-a-Lago assembling a great team, but also chatting with the business leaders. The real power brokers in a business sense in the US. Tim Cook, we know that Mark Zuckerberg's gone there to have dinner. Elon Musk seems like a permanent resident at the moment. People like Peter Thiel, Massa-san, and really the heavy hitters. And I think it's only a good thing, Nath, to be honest. I really do. I think it's so important. It's so important that everyone finds alignment, and that Trump brings these people into the fold to help. And I certainly think his intent is very, very. I think the intent's very good, and the intent is clearly just to come up with policy, come up with ideas, and bolster, strengthen the US economy, the stock market, give money in the pockets of the lower income earners, and get the working class back up, get the middle class strong, get America healthy. And as we know, when that happens, the Western world typically tends to do quite well and follow suit. So, very good signs on that front, Nath. What do you think about Big DJT talking to all the big hitters, big swingers?
Oh, I love it. We said it last week. I think it's become the Mar-a-Lago's the new White House. And yeah, his pre-planning's been awesome. You're just plain ignorant, if you don't think this is going to be a high impact, explosive first year of taking office. I loved seeing Massa get around it. He has a big affinity for the US. That's where he made his name for himself. He ran away from war with his mother when he was very little, and went to Japan, wasn't it?
Yes,
Japan, and then he realized he had to make heaps of cash. He went over to the US, and I think he has a big affinity for the US, a big soft spot. And
very good, very very good pun with the word soft, Nathan.
Yes, I didn't intend on doing it, but it happened. And he's ballsy. He's a ballsy character. He'd definitely have admiration for Trump and how he operates. So it's just another string to the bow, really. And yeah, I love the momentum. It's hard not to think that a lot of these things he talks about are going to get done. Whereas in other times, when politicians promise things, you never really know if anything's going to get done. I think a lot of this stuff is going to go through, which is very exciting.
There's urgency. There's There's positive intent. Nathan, it's everything we haven't been seeing from establishment governments. And look, I think even his staunchest critics would have to concede how proactive he's been, how hungry he is to implement. Whether they agree with the policy or not, it is so bloody refreshing to see the urgency. And so, yeah, I think every indication is that it is going to be an exceptionally active and change making 4 years ahead. So
Absolutely.
that is exciting. Bring on the change.
Oh, yeah. And talking of change, before we move into markets, I know you've been itching to lambast Trudeau, the Canadian weasel. So why don't you just rip in for a little bit here, mate?
Ooh.
You can have the floor. But he's been bullied by Big Trumpy, scared shitless, and I think he's running for the hills.
Justin. Oh, look, Nath, probably need to compose myself for at least 4 seconds to ensure I don't go too over the top with this little inbound monologue. But I think Justin Trudeau, respectfully, goes down as, I think, one of the most destructive forces in modern Western history. Really bringing the most nonsensical, progressive, what I would call uber woke policy and agenda to a country that has suffered so miserably and has endured a torrid time. Look, Canada's economy is in free fall. Their social fabric has been torn apart, Nath, and I also think their identity as a nation has been completely shredded, and to a point where Canada is virtually unrecognisable from the time before Trudeau took up his position in 2015 in terms of values, in terms of pride in nation, and in terms of what the country actually stands for. Canada was once an incredibly well-respected country on the world stage. And obviously, I think most of the world still has a lot of love for Canada. It is just so sad to see what that country has become under Trudeau's leadership, if you can call it that. And yes, Nath, I think, look, the fact that Trump's favourability in Canada is higher than Trudeau's, 26% plays 23% at latest poll, speaks volumes. The fact that Trudeau's biggest allies are departing him in droves and publicly rebuking him speaks volumes. And the opposition leader, by the way, the Conservative Party, does show promise, but it's yet another example, Nath, of people have suffered for too long and change is desperately required, and they're making sure it happens. So good riddance, Justin, when you do finally pack up your desk and leave. Please, if you do come to Australia, just have a quiet holiday, mate. Don't bring those stupid ideas. Don't go spouting your absolute rubbish on us. And yeah, Nath, look, it's the end of another failed lefty leader.
Yes, well said. I don't think I can top that.
You don't want to add any, you don't want to add a comment of your own to the mix?
Oh, it just looks like a slime ball. That's about it.
So you've basically summed it up in 3 words. You've gone for slime ball, weasel, and disaster. Love it.
I think they're all complimentary words to your monologue, my friend.
Thank you, mate.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Good to get that off the chest. And I have a quick question for you before we do dive into markets, Nath.
Yes.
Trump put out a Truth Social yesterday. It was quite funny. I interpreted it as humor, but it might not be entirely intended as being comedic. But he basically said, Governor Trudeau indicating that Canada is merely the 51st state of the US, which, in a sense, when you're subsidizing a country $100 million a year, it's an interesting conversation. But anyway, He did say the idea of Canada becoming a part of the US was what he thought is a good idea. And again, he might have been joking, but in all seriousness, Nath, if Canada cannot stand on its own 2 feet, um, and what's happening continues, if the Conservative Party, if they are elected, which it's looking like they are going to be, can't actually stem the tide and turn things around, is it crazy to suggest that Canada actually does become a part of the US?
I
Is that
don't
a
even.
crazy thought?
Nothing's crazy anymore, mate. But I don't know how that would work legally. I have no idea. I don't
Nor
understand.
do I. I
No.
just from a very simple standpoint of you know the people would maybe have a better living standard, and probably be better off. I think it is an interesting conversation to be had. Anyway, apparently only 13 or 15% of Canadians currently think that's a good idea, but it just makes you think a bit. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll leave that one alone. That's
it's worth
probably
looking into. It sparked my imagination as well during the week. But yeah, I wouldn't understand the slightest legal. I don't understand how they could do it. But
no.
maybe it's simpler than we think. But yes, change is in the air, my friend.
That is for
Ever
sure.
present change, which is good. They're all falling. Hollywood is falling. It's all happening, which is wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yes.
So,
Do you want to take the markets away, mate?
yeah, we will. We will.
You've had another good week.
Yeah, everything's in a bit of free fall this morning, my friend.
I was unaware.
Yeah, we're bouncing a little bit back, but it was to be expected. We had Bitcoin had a pretty good few days, launched up to nearly 110,000. So markets brought to you by Cashew. We've actually had a lot of action on Cashew this week. Lots of new users flooding in, which is exciting. Our analytics engine, all the insights, the signals, the benchmarks, all the juicy stuff other than our premium picks are all free now for listeners. Our stock app, which is also going to have crypto quite soon, we've jam-packed it with so many features, but it's all free value now other than our primo picks, which have been doing exceptionally well, but you'll have to pay if you want to see them. And that's always our sponsor for this segment. It's really cool to see a lot of people coming into the ecosystem. We did our biggest month of paid subscribers as well as free users, and it's only going to get bigger and better next year. So just to kick things off this week, we had some pretty big moves. Bitcoin, of course, has kind of carried the market for the last week in the crypto world, despite, as I said, today's little drawback. But I think a cool little topical chat on the markets is to try and map out when the top might be coming in for Bitcoin. I know you've got your thoughts. I've got my thoughts. And I think it'd be fun to come back to that in a few months' time and see where we are, because a lot of the commentators that I listen to still don't think this alt season has kicked in yet, where a lot of the money from Bitcoin starts to rotate into the other larger market cap stocks, not stocks, coins, projects. So, as the listeners probably know, Big Saucy's got a pretty big Bitcoin exposure, and I'm heavy on my XRP, which has been kind of moving up in tandem at the moment, and moving down in tandem. It'd be good for listeners' sake, I think, we just give our little synopsis on where we think things are heading, objectively, and yeah, it'd be good value for people, because I know a lot of my followers have now, not me telling them to do it, but I think a lot of them have invested in certain crypto assets, and people are now becoming a lot more inclined to understand where the ecosystem is heading, which is fantastic. So ultimately, we want to be a part of educating people. So I think it'd be a useful exercise for you to give your thoughts on where things are moving, and then I'll give my thoughts on where things are moving, my predictions. Of course, never financial advice from either of us. We're just giving our thoughts of what we might be potentially doing. But that's how I'd like to start this, because I think we're getting at the pointy end of price discovery for Bitcoin. Not quite there yet, but the pointy end. So yeah, tell us what you think, big fella.
Yeah, well, look, I've been diving into a few analyst reports, from large crypto holders, and I can see, admittedly, these are large Bitcoin portfolios, but nevertheless, Nath, I have looked really closely at what I think a feasible strike price, like target price for sell, might be. And equally, I've looked really closely at the cycles. So how long bull runs typically last, the factors behind when it might end, and I do think conditions. My personal take is that conditions are still quite favourable, and there are a couple of major market shifting, positive market shifting announcements and potential outcomes that are on the horizon, including the formation of a national Bitcoin or strategic reserve in the US, which I really think is a landmark moment for Bitcoin. So, look, my personal view at the moment is that that I still think there's about 6 months of strong run to come, and I do think that will be amplified. And the strength of the run will be exacerbated by some really positive Trump announcements very, very shortly after Jan 20, when he's confirmed and when he officially takes office. Excuse me. So, Nath, I do think, look, again, clearly not financial advice, but my best estimate is that it gets to about 140 or even as high as 150,000 USD. And that's certainly the price I'd be looking at to take some risk off the table, and grab a little bit of very healthy profit. So that's where I'm thinking, but I know you might have a slightly different view to mine.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment on timelines. I think it's more how it will behave, because remember, Bitcoin always kicks the run off, and Bitcoin has been moving really for even pre-election for quite a while the other projects all lay dormant. And once the Bitcoin dominance starts to break down, I believe it's at sort of 50, I'll just bring it up real quick. Bitcoin dominance is at a 56%, I think, which is the amount of capital that it's sucking in at the moment.
As in that's its market share of the total market.
Yeah, exactly.
Capital.
Yeah, so that is sitting at 58% at the moment. The target zone to really watch for is when that gets close to 50 and obviously below. We had a plummet. I mean, at the top, really, the top of the dominance chart was around 59. Why is this on the hourly? Let me get this up on the daily. That's better. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. So we topped the dominance in mid-November at 62%. And it then started to plummet down, and we saw it drop to 54%, which was really when we started to see the XRPs and all these ISO tokens rip, and a lot of other projects. And then, of course, you remember when it sort of hovered around 100? It just couldn't crack 100. So when I say the dominance is breaking down, it doesn't mean that the price breaks down per se. And I think that's important to clarify for new listeners. When we had that period, Bitcoin was sort of floating between 95 and 100, whilst all the other projects were soaking up the capital that was being rotated into these projects. Then what we've seen the last couple of weeks is Bitcoin reclaim a lot of dominance and surge from a 54% dominance back up to like 59-ish. And we've dropped a touch today, but 59. It's a big spike up in dominance, which has seen a proportional increase for Bitcoin compared to the rest of the market. So my thesis is that we're probably going to start to see that figure drop closer and closer to 50 in the coming month and a half, which will get us to where I believe is near the top. And I've said to you, it's probably between 115, 120-ish is my prediction. Maybe it stretches high 120s. That will be the initial top. And then what quite often happens in these cycles is there's what they call, the technical analysis guys, the TA guys call a blow-off top, which is where your 150 could come in. I tend to agree with that. And that is that the blow-off top is typically after there's this huge run-up in the bull run. So maybe, let's say March next year, we get to March or mid-Feb. There's going to be a lot of profit taking because that'll be a pretty significant overall run up for the market.
Yeah.
And then we start to see the sell off take place to an extent. However, there's always then a couple months later one final blow off top where it surges and we either exceed. So in some instances, it's exceeded the top of the first run up, or it's similar to the first one. So it'll just be sort of that little skate ramp pattern, if you will. So yeah, my time frame is I kind of agree it could hit 150, but that would be much later in the year, I reckon. Yeah. So mid-year, maybe mid to quarter three. And then in this initial run up, I'm thinking around 120, 115, 120 for Bitcoin. And then we'll start to see it stabilize, and a lot of the capital will then rotate into the other projects and bring the rest of the market up. And then I think you're right. Off the back of very exciting announcements, if they do run the strategic Bitcoin reserve, who knows where that lands. But yeah, my overall thesis personally is to keep a very close eye on when I think the top is in for this first run up, not the second. Yeah. And that's what we were privately messaging about. I think for me, I want to make sure I take a bit of risk off on the first run up because I don't know what's going to happen at the sell-off point, and I don't know where the second top's going to be. Yes. And that's happened every single cycle. There's always the sell-off, then there's the second top, and sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. We don't know. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to consider taking some risk off the table on the first top, the local high for that, and we'll see where things go from there.
Yes.
But yeah, it's all very exciting. My broader sentiment as well with Bitcoin is I struggle to I think it's all rosy once Trumpy gets in, but I don't like how my big two gripes with it from a listener perspective, because a lot of people have been asking me what I think of it. I don't like how we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, and I don't like how much the governments own, and I don't like that China control more than 50% of the mining. That's why I've never invested in it. Am I bullish Bitcoin from a project standpoint? Yes, but I don't have trust in that. So that's why I personally don't have exposure. Plus, it's very expensive. But I know you do, and I think it's been a terrific investment. I just think we've got to be careful moving into early next year to mitigate risk.
Well, look, again, speaking personally about our holding in Bitcoin, we're in the process now of formalizing an exit strategy or a sell strategy. So I think if you have been a holder for however long, it doesn't really matter how long. I think you've now got to think about, okay, well, and by the way, I think post inauguration you might get some really important dates set by the Trump administration, depending on how organized they are.
Yeah.
about implementation of various initiatives. So I do think, yes, I do think you set timeline, you set price target, but you also keep a very close eye, and you've got to remain pragmatic. So again, not financial advice is how I'm going to play it, but yeah, look, Nath, it is interesting times, and I think you and I are going to, continue to monitor very closely all sorts of key indicators, trends, patterns, sentiment. So it's but it's been a good ride, and I think there's a bit of juice left in her. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yes. Yes. Now we may have to wrap up there, my friend.
Indeed.
Sadly,
I
we have to
think
cut short this
I
week.
think we'll do an extra large saucy sips next week, mate. So I look forward to that very much. But Natho, before we go, I just want to. This may be the last epi before Christmas, so I want to wish the many hundreds of thousands of people that get the benefit of hearing from us. And well, to be fair, mate, actually, I mean, you know, there's millions of people at the moment on a weekly basis that are hearing your dulcet tones. But yeah, I do just want to say Merry Christmas and yeah, have a great festive season to everyone that pays attention to us and gives us the time of day, and to those who don't. So.
Yeah, beautiful sentiment, worth saying, and I completely agree. It's been a massive year. Merry Christmas to all the listeners across all platforms. It's been a transformative few months, and next year is going to be an abundant year. We've got big plans for the show. We've got big plans for the business, and we have big personal dreams. So let's make it all reality. Have a wonderful festive period, and we will see you in the next episode of the Red Hot Show.
There you guys. Thank you.